Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 359 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and also an author. Our third book came out recently. It's called From Letters to Leaders, Leveraging Your Fraternity or Sorority Experience to Land Your Dream Job. So go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, stepping and strolling has to be my favorite part of fraternity and sorority life. If you don't get moved and passionate about fraternity and sorority life when you see stepping and strolling on stage, then you might not have a pulse. I wish it was part of my undergraduate experience, but I'm fortunate to see it every year on campuses across the country, as well as conferences all over the country as an alumnus. This celebration of culture has the power to unite all councils, all students on campus. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about ways to engage the students on your campus. We're going to talk a little bit more about it today with our next guest. Eddie Francis is a marketing and communications professional. He's a speaker and an award-winning mass media veteran who dedicates his time to helping people and organizations express the value of their identities so that their brands stand out. Eddie produces and hosts the Our Edification podcast, as well as the Enrollify Podcast Network's I Want to Work There. He also presents the Black Greek Success Program to show members of African American fraternities and sororities how to enhance their leadership skills, and lectures to Livelihood to help college students prepare for their careers. The New Orleans native earned his master's degree in strategic leadership from Tennessee State University, love Tennessee, and his bachelor in mass communications from Loyola University New Orleans. He, of course, is a member of the American Marketing Association and Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Eddie is the proud husband of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated member, Dr. Halima Leak Francis. And he is also the proud father of Stevie. Welcome to the show, Eddie.
Mike, thanks so much for having me, man. This is definitely a pleasure to be on a Fraternity Foodie pod, especially since I'm a foodie. I love my food as well. So yeah, it is great to be on the podcast.
Yeah, I figured when I'd ask you to be on the podcast and it's called the Fraternity Foodie Podcast, I'm like, yeah, this is right up Eddie's lane right here.
You had me right here. You had me right here.
That's great. We have a lot in common, that is for sure. So, all right, let's talk about it. You decided on Loyola University in New Orleans for your undergraduate experience. Tell our audience, why did you choose Loyola?
Loyola chose me. So this is really an interesting story about social capital and how it can work. I was trying to get out of Louisiana for college. And so I was looking at all these different universities, and I had these dreams of just going off and going to a really big university. And then it was crunch time. I had to figure out where I was going to go and how I was going to pay for it. I mean, I had been accepted to a lot of universities, but I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. And one of my teachers at my high school said, hey, listen, you should try out for this program at Loyola, and it comes attached to a scholarship. And I was like, all right, I don't want to go to school in New Orleans. And he said, well, try it, make it your plan B or whatever. And I'm going, all right, fine. And as it turns out, I tried out for this program, and the social capital part comes in because this teacher, he knew some of the people who were reviewing the applications, and he said, hey, take a look at this guy. I think he's actually good for it. And so I was accepted to Loyola, but I was awarded the scholarship, and the rest is history. I went on and became part of the Wolfpack and graduated from Loyola.
I love it. I love it. Same thing happened to my son. I think money talks, especially nowadays. It's a lot more expensive to go to college today than it was when we were in school. And
it is.
I mean, if you get a nice scholarship and you don't have a lot of debt, I mean, you got to look real close at that. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly.
And you were also a very involved student there. I mean, you
Yeah.
served as Black Student Union Vice President. You were the Interfraternity Council VP of Promotions and Programming, and you're the chapter president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Now, I am sure, 100% sure, you could have chosen any student organization you wanted to get involved with, and they gladly would have taken you in. What made you choose Alpha Phi Alpha?
Again, it chose me. And so you know what? This is actually, I love telling this story. I went to college the summer that School Days was released.
Oh,
And so that summer, Spike Lee kind of put the word out on Black fraternities and sororities through that movie. And so I went to school thinking, I don't think that's for me. And I remember someone, a woman who actually became like my big sister. She's an AKA, and she goes, "Hey Eddie, you ever thought of being in a fraternity?" And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that ridiculous, blah blah blah. And I used some choice words. Actually, I was just like, I'm not doing it. And so the guy who was now her husband, a guy by the name of Emil, actually approached me one day and said, "Hey, we have an interest meeting. Why don't you just come check it out?" And I was like, all right, maybe. As a matter of fact, another good friend of mine was a Sigma at the time, and he was a member of Phi Beta Sigma. And he actually had also invited me to their interest meeting. And so I thought about it. And I was like, I don't know. And I had gone to the Alpha interest meeting, and I was really impressed that there was so much depth to what Alpha does. But what really, really got me was this guy named Victor. And Victor, I'll never forget this. I was sitting in the student union one day, and Victor was this brother, like this deep chocolate brother, tall, muscular brother, slender but muscular. He walks in the student union with a t-shirt on. Now this is 1989, okay? The spring of 89. So the t-shirt had the felt iron-on letters on it and all that good stuff. And it was kind of tight on him, but he was tall, slender, muscular, so it worked for him and all that good stuff. He has on his t-shirt, slacks, dress shoes, and a briefcase. And I was like, okay, who is this? Who is this dude? So then, Mike, I'm sitting with a group of girls, and we're all just sitting there, just, chatting it up, right?
uh,
Victor sits down, and I'm like, oh, okay, he's super smooth, brother. Okay. And they look at Victor and they go, "Victor, why don't you sing something for us?" And I was like, what is this? And Victor he's like, ooh, and he starts singing, and they just started swooning while Victor was singing. And I was like, yeah, I want to be an alpha. I'm going to be an alpha.
I mean, when you see something like that on campus, you just throw your hands up. You're like, all right, Alpha, it is.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
But
this guy
but
had
to
it
be
all together.
but to be clear, I mean, it was the depth of the service, it was the membership, it was the commitment that brothers had to education and all that good stuff. That's what sold me. But I
Sure.
cannot argue with what Victor did that day. I was just sitting there going, oh.
Oh, okay then. Okay. You see that? I mean, it's like they say in the industry, right? People join people. You saw this guy,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Yep, okay,
Yeah.
it's Alpha." I mean, that was it. Listen, Sigma is a fantastic organization, has great history, has
Yeah.
great depth, has
Yeah.
great brothers. I'm friends with so many of them as well.
Yeah.
But when you see something like that, you're like, people join people. You're like, that's my guy.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's great. I love that story. Now, we talked a little bit about stepping and strolling, certainly a
Yeah.
huge part of Divine Nine organizations. What interests me is that you believe that there are some career lessons that we can learn from stepping. Talk to us about that.
When I was in college, I was a step master. And I love stepping. I mean, I just loved it. I mean, so Mike, the other day I decided I was working out. I decided to pull out some of my old moves, and I survived. But here's the but when I was actually working with one of the groups that I did choreography for, um I didn't realize how much I was really learning about leadership in those moments. And some of the things that I learned that I actually have taken throughout my career with me is, number one, is that success doesn't come without risk. There was this situation where um, I was one of those guys who I always wanted to try to do something that I didn't think the audience had seen before. And a lot of groups, they would come out and they would come out to the same songs because they were the popular songs, and they would do some of the same stuff on stage because they saw somebody else do it, and they knew it would bring the house down. And I would always insist that we do something that was just really different for at least the local market, right? Uh, that went south a couple of times. Okay, let's be clear. That went south a couple of times. I had a couple of embarrassing shows, but it eventually paid off because there was a group that we got together. We placed second in the Bayou Classic, which is a huge Greek show. We placed in a couple of other Greek shows. And one of the things that I learned throughout my career is that if you're going to get something done, at some point you're going to have to be creative, you're going to have to be innovative, you're going to have to take a risk if you're going to go from level A to level B to level C, or to wherever you want to go to the higher levels. The other thing I learned, in that same vein, is that leadership is not a popularity contest, not at all. One of the decisions that I hated to make is that our team, there were a couple of members of the team who just were not doing what they were supposed to do. They weren't attending practices. And so the team said, hey, listen, Eddie, we need you to make a decision here. And it just so happened that one of the people with whom they asked me to make this decision was a very, very close brother. And it tore me up. I was just like, man, this dude and I, we have been on stage together so many times, but he's just not acting right on this particular occasion. And the team decided they wanted to win, and they didn't think that would happen with his, record there. And so that's a lesson I took with me. And as someone who has worked in higher education, nothing has taught me that leadership is not a popularity contest like watching college presidents. College presidents, it is a sexy looking thing to do. I hear all these people say, I've always wanted to be a president. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, but do you want to be a president when you have to make a decision that's going to really hack off your students, is going to hack off the alumni, but it's for the betterment of the institution? Mm-hmm. Do you want to be a president then? And I'm actually watching somebody now who said that they always wanted to be a president. They became a president, and handling those tough situations is really, really hard. So one of the things that Stepping did teach me, it looks great when you get a trophy when you place, but it's not a popularity contest to lead a team. Mm-hmm. And then another thing I learned is that people see what they get. If you rehearse well, it's gonna show up. If everybody does what they're supposed to do, it is gonna show up. And it's the same thing in the workforce. I mean, you show up to those meetings unprepared, that shows up. People see what they get, and so that's a pretty big one. I learned that the details, and I really wish, Mike, I could say I'm the biggest detail-oriented person in the history of the workforce. I am not. Okay, I details. I have to focus real hard when it comes to details. They're pain, but they pay off. One of my favorite quotes is Mike Golick, old NFL player who I'm sure you know.
Oh yeah.
And I love this quote. He said, 99% of winning is what people don't see you doing. And so people don't see those step rehearsals when you are trying to get it right. They don't see the pain of making sure all the arms are at the right angles, making sure the steps are precise, making sure everybody has the right looks on their faces. They don't see all that stuff. And it's the same in your career. People do not see when you are preparing for that big presentation. They don't see you rehearsing for that big presentation. They don't see you talking yourself through when you want to go to your boss and you want to lobby for a promotion or a raise or something like that. They don't see those steps. And so the details are pain when you go over all of those things that you have to go over in order to get what you want. But if you can master the details, then you're going to get what you need. And then the final thing, and I think this is probably my biggest lesson from stepping, is you got to know when to trust your team. You've got to know when to trust your team. We had a situation. There was a brother who, this brother had gotten sick right before a show. I mean, he's sweating and he's sneezing and he's coughing and all this stuff. And I'm going, he's not going to make it, man. This isn't going to work.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, I had put together this intro, and the team was not very shy about telling me that they didn't think the intro was very good. And I was just like, oh, how could you say this? No, this is a great intro. And it's just like, Eddie, we love you, but no, not this one. And so I did two things. One, I just let it go, and I said, okay, fine. If you got a better idea for an intro, let's do it. So they all got together, and I didn't want to take part in this new intro because my ego was hurt, but I did, and the intro was great. The brother who was sick, he figured out how to get himself together, and he just did all this stuff, and it was great. We wound up doing a great job in the show, and so that was a huge lesson in trusting the team, and it happened to me also when I was a director of communications and marketing. I would have all these ideas of how I thought we could better promote the university where I was leading the effort. And there was one person in particular, the social media coordinator, and I had all these ideas for her, and I'm going, yeah, no, you do it this way, do it this way. I tried it, and I saw the numbers go up. Well, Mike, I started micromanaging her, and I was reading her body language, and I was like, okay, I'm really annoying her right now because I keep telling her what to do and I'm not letting her do her job. And at that moment I said, you know what? Let me sit back, shut up, and let me just see what she can do, because after all, I hired her, so she must be good at something. And so I trusted her. And from there, she did an amazing job with the social media for the university. Numbers shot up like a rocket, did some stuff I didn't even think about. And then on top of that, I started to ask the team, hey, what do you think we should do? How do you think this should go? And in trusting them, we got some good results from a lot of stuff that we were doing. So yeah, so those are a bunch of the lessons that I learned just from stepping. And I'm glad I was able to kind of get that stuff and move it into my career, and it's something that I hope a lot of other folks can get as well.
Man, that's incredible. I mean, that's a presentation right there, all the lessons from stepping. I mean, that's just incredible stuff. You're absolutely right on just about everything you talked about. I mean, you think about accountability, making decisions as president of a university, you can learn those lessons as, president or treasurer in your local chapter as well, because you got to make some difficult decisions. And sometimes it's not popular.
Right.
Getting rid of somebody. You might have to get rid of somebody in your chapter to protect the chapter. And
Yeah.
that accountability is really, really hard for students. So, I think that's a great lesson there. And I also think, of us as speakers, people look at us as speakers on a stage and they're like, yeah, that's sexy right there. Yeah, it is sexy, but you have no idea how much work goes into getting onto that stage. That is
Yes.
our reward, is up on stage. You don't see the sweat and the tears and the sleepless nights and how am I going to pay the bills and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You don't see
Yeah.
any of that when I'm up on stage.
Yeah. Mike, I used to do stand-up comedy,
Yeah.
and there was this guy who I used to do shows with, and I would watch him rehearse the same joke over and over and over again. And he would rehearse it down to how he would hold his hand. And he was a smoker. So he would rehearse it down to how he held his cigarette and everything. And I sat there and I just watched him one day, and and at first I was like, man, he's really obsessed. And I said, no, he's really focused.
Mm.
Um, and he knows how much work is going to take if he's going to do a good routine. And his routines were always great. And everybody thought that he was just coming up with this stuff on the fly on stage.
No,
Like, he was rehearsing and rehearsing and
that's right.
rehearsing, and he put a lot of hard work into the routines that he did.
Yeah, that's really good. And you've also done incredible work in terms of public relations, communications, marketing. You've worked for several higher ed institutions. We're talking about Southern University at New Orleans, Paul Quinn College, Dillard University. What is the biggest challenge right now, in your opinion, for higher education in the area of marketing and communications?
There are actually two things that keep me up. One thing keeps me up at night is how internal politics can compromise the marketing communications operations on campus. One of the unfortunate things is that everybody thinks Marcom is easy work. So they honestly, the way that they approach it is, oh, you're the arts and crafts shop, just go ahead and make it pretty for us. And it's like, no, that's not our job. Marketing, number one, is on the business side of the house. Communication is more on the business side of the house, but it's a different part. And so, it's really tough when you have these internal politics and people make a whole lot of marketing decisions before it even gets to the marketing department. And then now we have to clean it up, right? And so that's one thing. And it compromises Marcom operations all over campus. I don't care what university you're talking about. I have all these colleagues who are just like from big 30,000 student universities to small 1,000 student universities, But the biggest thing that keeps me up at night, this is my main thing, is that we have a big external challenge in higher education, and that is this sense of cynicism that is growing. The Chronicle of Higher Education did a big article, and they asked the question: Does higher education need a big tent type of marketing campaign like the Got Milk campaign from years ago to dairy farmers? And I had a quote in that article, and one of the things that I talked about when I was talking to the reporter is that we have got to do a better job. I think nationally, you got over 4,000 colleges and universities. We have to do a much better job of showing higher education as one big buffet, and how students can choose whatever they want from that buffet, as opposed to trying to make students go to certain colleges and universities, and so you have the families of privilege who are saying, well, my kid has got to go to Stanford. My kid has got to go to Georgetown. They've got to go to Northwestern or Harvard or someplace like that. And then you have, on the other end of the spectrum, you have a lot of Black families who are saying, oh, no, my kid has got to go to an HBCU. They better go to an HBCU. Well, instead of doing that, show these kids the entire buffet, right? And I think by trying to make kids go in certain directions, I think that really, really grows that sense of cynicism that we see. And I think also that contributes to this thing that we have, and it's always been a thing. It's not like it's a new thing at all, but I think it's getting a little bit more pronounced, where you're getting more of that college isn't for everybody sentiment. And I agree with that. College isn't for everybody, but in the Black community, that affects us worse than anybody else, because now if you have a Black kid who is saying college isn't for everybody, well, that's one less Black doctor, and that's one less Black lawyer, and we need those doctors and lawyers in the Black community in particular. So I think this growing sense of cynicism is something that really, really is a big challenge for the communications and marketing area, because now we have to constantly figure out how to authentically present these colleges and universities so that students aren't saying to us, oh, you just show me the picture of the happy kid. Nobody's happy all the time. He's like, yeah, no, you're right. Nobody's happy all the time, but I'm certainly not going to show you a picture of the disgusted kid. Get out of here. So, but I think our challenge is to deal with that cynicism. We have to figure out how to present our colleges and universities in a much more authentic way, but then also in a way that is much more accessible for students of various types of tastes.
That's great insight from a veteran in the industry. I really like that a lot. And you're right about that growing cynicism. I think, especially for public universities that get funding from the state, there's a lot of pressure to show results with that money. And now you're starting to see politics and higher education are starting to weave together. You're getting university presidents that are really politicians that are starting to step into that role. And now everything is all convoluted in terms of politics and universities. So, yeah, really interesting landscape that we're looking at right now, for sure.
Yeah. It is that the political sentiment is really going to make things much, much tougher on everybody on campuses, unfortunately.
Yep, for sure. Now, I want to talk about your program because I think it's amazing. Since 2003, the Black Greek Success Program has helped Divine Nine college members to enhance their leadership skills by focusing on their unique identities as protectors of a proud legacy of service within Divine Nine organizations. Talk to our audience about that legacy of service.
One of the things I was trying to figure out when I thought about this program was I was trying to figure out how is it that members of African American fraternities and sororities, specifically the Divine Nine, how do we manage to get into these spaces all the time where we can make this change? How do we, and it was really, I don't want to say it was bothering me. It was intriguing me how we were able to make an impact, a very small group of people making a large impact all over the place. And I don't think that in a Divine Nine, we think of ourselves that way all the time. And we should think of ourselves that way. And so I think when you talk about having to to protect this legacy, you know, let's think very simply about something like the Harlem Renaissance. When you think about the Harlem Renaissance, excuse me, 9 times out of 10, the first name that anybody is going to think about is probably, can you think of somebody by any chance? Are you familiar?
Jeez. I
Probably.
mean, you would know better than I
So,
would.
so Langston Hughes is the
Langston
first
Hughes.
one that's going to come
Okay.
up, right? And
Okay.
Langston Hughes was a member of Omega Psi Phi.
Sure.
You're going to get people who are going to blurt out immediately Zora Neale Hurston,
Right.
Zeta Phi Beta. You're going to get people who are going to blurt out immediately James Weldon Johnson. He was Phi Beta Sigma.
Uh-huh.
And so you have all these members of at the time, the Great Eight, who were somehow influential on one of the biggest intellectual movements in American history. And then you think of the civil rights movement, right? Civil rights movement, first name's going to come up is going to be Martin Luther King,
Absolutely.
right?
Every time.
So Martin Luther King, he was a member of Alpha. Ralph Abernathy, who was often right next to Martin Luther King, Kappa Alpha Psi. John Lewis, who we lost a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, a member of Phi Beta Sigma.
That's right.
And then if you think about the big political movement that happened, where you have had these pioneering African American leaders, in politics. Right now we have Kamala Harris, who we all know as an AKA, right?
Sure.
Member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. But were it not for Shirley Chisholm, a member of Delta Sigma Theta, we might not even have seen a Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And then you have some of the other pioneers, like the first Black governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, who's a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, the first Black governor of Virginia, Douglas Wilder, who's a member of Omega Psi Phi. So this is the legacy that I think we have to protect. And I think now is the time for us to reach our college students and to really let them know you are standing on the shoulders of some
Giants.
incredible giants
Oh,
here.
yeah.
So you have an enormous responsibility, but it's not a responsibility that somebody is forcing on you. You decided that you want to be a member of one of these fraternities and sororities that these people came from.
Yeah.
You made that call. So since you made the call, you have chosen to take up a pretty enormous mantle, a pretty heavy mantle. And so what the Black Greek Success Program does is that it first of all, it makes the argument to students that you have this unique identity. But then it also makes the argument to students that with this unique identity, you got to do something about it. You
That's
got to do
right.
something with it. And
Mhm.
so you made this choice. What do you do with this unique identity? How do you put it into action as a campus leader and then later on as a community leader?
Yeah. It's like Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really it is. When you put those letters on, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And
Yes.
I don't know that people really understand that when they first join. So thank goodness for the Black Creek Success Program to really frame that up in
Yeah.
terms of that legacy of service. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you can trace that through the Divine Nine. I think having those conversations, especially with newer members that might not be familiar with all of that, uh,
Right.
that's
Right.
huge. I mean, that's absolutely huge and changes the way they think about their membership in the organization. So, how do you make the most of your college experience then?
Yeah, I think You know, one of the story that I really love to tell students is that, I kind of missed the point of college while I was there. I was there. I mean, my parents were college alumni. I mean, they both had master's degrees, and they were both high school teachers. They were both educators, and so the next logical thing for me to do after high school was to get my butt on somebody's college campus, and
Yep.
so I kind of went to it blindly, to be honest with you, because to me it was just something I was supposed to do. And one of the things that I admit to students, Mike, I'm sure you've heard the joke that there are those who graduate summa cum laude, there are those who graduate magna cum laude, and there are those who graduate thank you laude, right? So I was a thank you Laude graduate. And so I talk about that, and I tell students that what I learned through my experience of just kind of floating through college and kind of having to beg my way out of college, beg my way to graduation, is that, first of all, you have to ask yourself, why are you even here? Why are you even on the campus? But I found that when it comes to students, there's a difference between asking them, why are you in college? And what do you plan to do with that degree you're going to earn? And there's a big difference between those two questions. That second question is the one that really gets them thinking. And so when it comes down to making the most of the college experience, I think the way students make the most of their college experience, number one, is by having a sense of vision. Visualize what it is you want to do with that degree, but then also having a sense of purpose, understanding why it is that you were here, and then also having a sense of accountability, holding yourself accountable for all the mistakes that you make when you're in college, being very honest about those mistakes, but at the same time, celebrate your victories and have a good time. Please, by all means, go to the parties and do all the fun stuff, but definitely have that sense of vision, purpose, and accountability to carry it through.
Makes total sense to me. Now, a lot of the fraternity and sorority members that are listening right now, they're thinking about brotherhood. They're thinking about sisterhood. They're thinking about solidarity in their organizations. And I feel like, a lot of that leads to hazing and other problems, and that's a conversation for another time. But you talk about this gumbo theory of improving your chapter chemistry. Tell us about the gumbo theory, because everybody listening wants to improve their chapter chemistry.
Yeah, that actually is a fan favorite. Students love it when I do the gumbo theory, and that's because, first of all, I talk about gumbo. I mean,
Who doesn't like that?
yeah, exactly. Who doesn't like gumbo except for people who just don't know their purpose in life? Yeah. So first of all, I'm a cook. I spend a lot of time in the kitchen. That the kitchen is my happy place. So I make gumbo, and when I cook gumbo, it always amazes me how you get all these ingredients and there's this process involved in doing it, and you have to figure out how to get all these ingredients to work together for one of the most popular dishes in the country. And so, um, the way it works is that I like to look at every personality in a chapter as an ingredient in gumbo. And there are these distinct parts of gumbo that you have. You have the meat, you have the seasoning, you have the roux, you have all these different parts of it. But the trick is, and without giving too much of what I talk about away, the trick is how to get all these. How do you get the meat to work with the spice? How do you get the spice to work with the roux? How do you get the roux to interact with the water and all these other things? And one of the things, like with any other dish, if you put too much of anything in something, it's probably not going to turn out too great. If you don't put enough of something, then it's not going to turn out too great. In gumbo, the worst thing you can do in gumbo is mess up the roux. That is the absolute worst thing. And for those who don't know, roux is your gravy base, basically.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I tell people is that if you mess up the roux of the gumbo, that's like having very flawed leadership in your chapter, because they are the base. They set the tone. You can't burn them. You can't undercook it. You can't do any of that stuff. And so what I talk to the students about when I talk about the gumbo theory is, number one, identifying those personalities in the chapter, but then also getting those personalities. Well, first of all, identifying the personalities, but then number two, realizing that every personality has value. That is a huge part of it. Even those annoying, spicy people in a chapter who are always argumentative, who are always saying, stop the meeting. I know we're almost done with the agenda, but I have an issue here. Don't give me point of order because I need to speak, So, but they bring value. And the question is, how do you take what it is that they're giving you and how do you use it so that there is that value added to the chapter? It really is more of an art than a science, Mike, and you know that as well as anybody.
Absolutely. I really like that analogy a lot. I mean, the reason why I say that is that, we're almost fighting the way that we're wired as humans because we want to bring people into the chapter that are just like us. I mean, that's kind
Yeah.
of the way that we're wired. And you kind of have to fight that a little bit and think about this logically and say, okay, what are we missing from the chapter? What positions do we not have? Maybe somebody who's an accounting major to be a treasurer, or somebody who's very creative and is going to help us win Greek Week. I mean, there are things, pieces that you need, and even Greek Week is a really good example. I mean, you need to show talent in a lot of different areas, not just athletics. You need
Right.
to have scholarship and academics down. You got to have creativity for the banner that you're going to be making. So you need all of these pieces, and if you're going to only get guys that are all from your high school, it's not going to work out well for you.
Yeah, Mike, is the thing about fraternity is that you get dropped into this ready-made family.
Yeah.
Like the concept of like you don't have time to get up to speed on it. You get initiated, you get your letters, and now you got to be somebody's brother. And you have to really understand what that means. Like there is weight to that, right? And so it's not so much that you have to do it, but everybody else around campus see the label fraternity on your group. So their expectation is that you will actually be brothers or you will actually be sisters. And one of the things I do mention in the Black Greek Success Program is you have those people outside of your chapter who kind of like to try to pick your chapter apart to see what you're really made of.
Right.
And so that happens to everybody, who's in a fraternity or a sorority. So you get dropped into the gumbo, man, and you got to figure out how you're going to mix it up with those other ingredients and how you're going to make it work.
Yeah. And the same thing is true when you get out in the real world. You're going to have a team
Yeah.
of people reporting to you. You got to figure out how you're going to make all these pieces work together and work in unison. And that, I think, hopefully the fraternity and sorority experience gives you that ability to do that out in the real world. One of the things that we should definitely talk about, sexual assaults are happening on college campuses all across the country. And we're seeing sometimes even demonstrations out in front of fraternity houses.
Yeah.
And you see that the students are asking for just more accountability from the university when it comes to these cases, more transparency when it comes to adjudication of these cases. How can fraternity men specifically help in the fight against sexual assaults?
Yeah, I'm giving you my top three. The number one thing is, guys, you got to have an open discussion. Like you have got to openly talk to one another about it. And you got to be willing to go into those uncomfortable parts of the discussion, which includes if you yourself have been sexually assaulted. And a lot of guys, we don't like to talk about that, but you have to, because if you don't get it out in the open, then nobody is going to understand how big of an issue it is and how pervasive of an issue it is. I think the second thing is men, I think, really need to produce more domestic violence awareness events, especially surrounding sexual assault, because women are looking to us. Let's be clear. As men, we have a lot of power and we have a lot of influence, and we know it. We know it. And so when we are the ones who are walking up and saying, you know what, we're going to produce an event and we would like your guidance on this event, ladies. And I think that's really a tremendous thing that any group of men can do to show that they are in tune and we want to do something about it. And I think the other thing is, and this is really, I think, a big thing, is volunteer at domestic abuse shelters. I think that's a great opportunity for men to learn. And of course, when it comes down to doing it, if there's a domestic abuse shelter in your area that you can volunteer at, first of all, ask what it is that you can do. And then a lot of times what they may say, they may say small jobs like just fix a couple of things at the shelter. It may be as simple as painting something or something like that. But when they do tell you what it is that they would like for you to do to assist, take the time to listen to some of the stories, and don't just listen to the story to be listening to the story. Really, really pause and think about it. And in the case of sexual assault, think about this person, being someone very close to you if you've never had, or if you've never been told about an incident that happened with someone close to you. So those are three things that I think men can do.
I love those tips. I think they're fantastic. And I think, just reflecting after you volunteer at a shelter like that, I think could be
Yeah.
really helpful. I mean, if all of the brothers would just journal their thoughts about what they saw and heard and learned that particular day by volunteering at a shelter, and then maybe sharing it with each other, I just think you can have incredible conversations around that. So I think that reflection is super, super important when you come out of something like that. I hope that brothers will take the time to do that, and listen to your words. I think that's really, really important. One last thing I love talking about, which is because, I believe in the fraternity and sorority system. And I think it really does help you in terms of, leadership skills, communication skills, motivation skills. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But how can fraternity and sorority leaders improve their resume through that fraternity and sorority experience?
Well, one thing that I want to fall back on is, you and I had talked about how, you can carry that experience from the Gumbo Theory and all these personalities into the workforce. One of the beautiful things about the fraternity experience for me is that being around so many strong personalities, I remember the first couple of professional meetings I sat in, and I was sitting there like, I've seen this before. It's like I have seen these personalities before. Nothing in here, nobody here is surprising me at all because I have seen all of this. So that being said, though, you got to show people. Now, I've been in talent acquisition, and one of the things that I really want fraternity and sorority members to know is this. There have been studies about how long it takes hiring managers and recruiters to look at resumes. The average time is around 6.2 seconds that someone is going to look at a resume. I used to be a high volume recruiter, so I would look at hundreds of resumes per week. My average time was between 4 and 5 seconds because I had to get through them, right? I had to get through them, and I had to get some candidates out there, and I had to get some people into the pipeline. With that being said, stuff on your resume has got to really, really show up. And in the top third of the resume, that's where I think you have an important opportunity to really show people what you're made of. And one of the ways, the major way, I'm going to say one major way, is to really take the experiences that you've had with your chapter, take the experiences you've had on campus, the people skills that you've learned, the technical skills that you've learned, and sink as much of that as you can into a short profile at the very top of your resume, right below your contact information. And as a Greek, you've done it. You've done it. I mean, like a fraternity or sorority, that is a ready-made leadership institute. So you've had these opportunities to gather great communication skills, great collaborative skills. Project management is really something that a lot of people overlooked. If you are someone who had to put together the last fundraiser, you were the chair, and you were the one who saw that thing through from beginning to end, and then you did some sort of debrief on the back end of that event, then guess what? You have gotten some project management skills under your belt, and that needs to be on your resume. And so really, really take inventory of all the things that you are doing in your chapter and throughout campus. Gather all of those skills, write those skills down, and start putting those skills on your resume. Go to your career center and have the folks in your career center help you with this stuff. Or if you have people in your fraternity or sorority on the alumni level who are always evaluating resumes and that sort of thing. If you know they run a business and that sort of thing, ask them for help. Use your resources, right? And so I think the biggest thing that fraternity and sorority members can do is they can collect all of those skills that they are learning in Greek life and on campus, put them on paper, and start finding ways to incorporate that on the resumes.
Beautifully said. I love it. Now, you and I both love good food. I mean, there's no secret there. Where should we go for a great meal when we are in the New Orleans area?
My favorite spot is Dookie Chase. Dookie Chase is a historic restaurant. It's an old Creole cooking restaurant. I will put it to you this way. I grew up a few blocks from Dookie Chase. The gumbo at Dookie Chase tastes just like the gumbo my dad used to make. And so it is, I mean, it is a thing of beauty. They use this Creole, they put Creole hot sausage in it. Dookie Chase also, now my wife she is a fried chicken connoisseur. And if you ask her, Dookie Chase serves the best fried chicken in New Orleans. And so you just can't go wrong with them. If you love great Creole cooking, or if you want to try great Creole cooking, Dookie Chase is my top. Love
All
them.
right. I'm going to go and check that out. I mean, how can you go wrong with fried chicken and gumbo? Come on. Come on. I mean, that's like heaven on earth right there. And I do miss good Creole cooking. I mean, I live in Franklin, Tennessee, and there used to be a really good Creole restaurant with a couple of owners that were from New Orleans. They brought it to Tennessee, and it was fantastic right downtown. And my wife and I, we fell in love with Franklin, Tennessee because of that restaurant. That's how we knew this is where we were going to move from New York. And unfortunately, they went out of business during the whole pandemic. A lot of the restaurants, unfortunately, had closed down, and
Yeah.
they were one of the casualties. So now I got to go to New Orleans in order to get real Creole cooking. So I'm going to see you there for sure. I'll give you a call. We're going to go and we're going to go check that out.
Please do, man. Absolutely.
For sure. We're
Absolutely.
definitely going to make that happen. All right. So, if our listeners, if they want to hire you to speak, they want to bring the Black Greek Success Program to their campus, where should they go in order to connect with you and get you to speak on their campus?
EddieFrancis.com. Just go to my website, EddieFrancis.com, EddieFrancis. EddieFrancis.com is where you can find me. And I will be more than happy to talk to you. And one thing I love to do when it comes to the Black Greek Success Program, if it's okay with the people on campus, whoever's organizing the event, I really love to invite all Greeks to the event, because I have found that all Greeks will come to me and say, wait a minute, that is not just for the Divine Nine, that works for us too. And also people who are interested in Greek life, I love to extend that invitation to them as well.
That's great that you're making it open to all students on campus. I think there's a ton to learn here. I mean, we put together these books that are primarily aimed at fraternity and sorority leaders, but all the concepts that we teach, any college student can use this in order to advance their career or to be successful beyond college. So I agree with you there. I love that it's open to everybody. And who knows, maybe you invite a student to come to the Black Greek Success Program and they end up joining a fraternity or sorority on campus. That's not a bad thing. I mean, we should
Mm-mm.
do a little bit more of that, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. I always, I always tell folks, you never know what kind of special student you're missing out on if you don't extend that invitation to them.
That's
And
right.
sometimes the best prospects are the students who don't say anything at all because they don't think it's for them.
Right.
I really don't think that I would be in the Divine Nine today if a brother had not come to me and simply invited me to a meeting.
Amen.
And so you never know who is being way too shy to say something, and don't hold it against them that they're shy. Please don't do that. Because again, you just don't know what kind of potential leader you're going to be growing if you don't say something to that student who you know to be really talented, and you know that they're really smart, and you know they will look good in your letters. So yeah, that's why I love to open that invitation up.
Yeah, don't dismiss those shy people out there. I tell you what, I was one of them. And now
Hmm.
I'm a public speaker speaking to 4,000 college students. Believe me, you're going to get all kinds of skills as a result of the fraternity. We're all better because of our affiliation with the organization. So don't forget that. People don't just come right out of the chute as an instant leader, they develop those leadership
Right.
skills over time
Yep.
in the organization. So give them a chance and invite them. And all of us as members, we were invited to come to a recruitment event at some point. So you got
Hmm.
to do the same thing and you got to extend it to another student on your campus.
Absolutely.
This has been a
Absolutely.
lot of fun, Eddie. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with our audience today.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really, really appreciate it, and I had fun, man.
Very good. It's been a pleasure. And to our listening audience, if you enjoyed this talk with Eddie, make sure that you like it and you share it on social media. If you want to invite him to your campus, go to eddiefrancis.com and go and bring him to your campus. He is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. We'll see you next time.